Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Friday Ramblings. I'm here as always with you to discuss everything in pop culture that is worth discussing, and hopefully encouraging you to check out some stuff you've never encountered before. With this in mind, we're going to cover not so much Spider-Man himself, not his villains like we've done before, but a grouping of the lesser known, less popular allies he has had off and on throughout the years. Thing is, with Spider-Man being such an A-list hero for so many decades at Marvel, his book was often used as a place to kind of test out new heroes and see if they would catch on or not. And of course, naturally, somebody uses a character, doesn't catch on, they kind of set it aside. Enough years pass, other writers come in, and they'll dust a character off, give them a second chance. So you get kind of what we got here, which is a series of characters that have superpowers, try to be super, sometimes as heroes, sometimes as villains, but ultimately never really caught on and became the big names that, Spider-Man buddies like the Human Torch and Daredevil are. Now, we're going to skip a couple of them because, well, I already discussed them in my previous video on Marvel's more supernatural-based characters, being Man-Wolf and Morbius the Living Vampire. So, while they are Spider-Man-related characters, we've already discussed them in a previous video, and no need to sit there and go over the same territory all over again. So no, I'm not skipping them out of spite or anything crazy like that, for those of you who have not seen that video. First up, we're going to start with a relatively recent character, and that is Cardiac. Cardiac debuted in December of 1990 in The Amazing Spider-Man 342 as his civilian identity of Elias Wortham, appearing as Cardiac in his full costume in 344. Now, Elias Wortham is a physician and surgeon who is also the owner and administrator of a biological research firm. Elias is driven by his brother's death to research life-saving medical practices, as his brother's death was the result of corporate greed due to a pharmaceutical company having the medicine and technology to save his brother's life, but not having presented it to the public and made it available, as they had not yet figured out exactly how to make it as profitable as possible. Thus, Elias, being a physician and believing greatly in that physician's oath that medicine should all be about helping people, whether it puts money in your pocket or not, he became very resentful over the years. So how did he gain superpowers to help him with this? Well, thanks to his own research, he was able to implant hold on, let me get my scientific jargon here right. Elias replaces his natural heart with a beta particle reactor, which supplies energy throughout his body, causing it to enhance his muscles, giving him speed, agility, reflexes, and he can also let the energy build up, firing it through his fists or the technological power staff he wields. Cardiac also has a vibranium weave mesh under his skin to help with the energy flow and provide a little extra durability. So as Cardiac, he would clash with and help Spider-Man, as they would cross paths, both being New York-based heroes, and Spider-Man, especially once learning Cardiac's full story, found himself morally conflicted. He did not like the fact that Cardiac tended to believe there was no problem with killing those that were putting greed before saving lives, whereas Spider-Man does not believe in taking lives. But knowing where Elias's rage comes from, and that, you know, he is targeting criminals, specifically the kind that, due to having some money and whatnot, are kind of getting away with a lot, even when people know they're up to no good. It's one of those sticky situations for Spider-Man. Eventually, as the 90s wore on, though, Cardiac would become used less and less, and would by and large, except for occasional cameo appearances and big, group shot type deals, disappear from the comics. In more recent years, though, he was brought back, having focused more on his role as a surgeon and physician. Elias had started a charity group known as Heart, which provided medical treatment for those that could not afford it and desperately needed it. Unfortunately, he went up against the Superior Spider-Man, this being a period of time where Dr. Octopus had transferred his brain into Spider-Man's body, allowing Otto Octavius to prove that he was, in fact, a better person than Spider-Man all along by proving he could out-Spider-Man Peter Parker. It was kind of an interesting period for the comics, but one that was destined to be finite, which it was. But, long story short, Cardiac was using his costumed identity and powers to occasionally steal the medical technology he needed so that Hart could save as many lives as possible among those who had no money themselves for treatment. Superior Spider-Man initially plans on just shutting Cardiac down completely, but shows a bit of a change of heart, especially when Cardiac, not knowing Superior Spider-Man was actually Doc Ock, praises the technology that was based off Doc Ock's work and showing how it can be used to save lives, touching Doc Ock's ego and heart just a little bit. Cardiac would appear one final time during the Goblin Nation arc that ended the Superior Spider-Man era, trying to help out the various people that were being hurt as Norman Osborn, the self-proclaimed Goblin King, went to war in New York City, trying to take it for his own, along with his Goblin army. And as part of the fallout, the main Heart Center was blowed up real good. I'm sure Cardiac will eventually return, whether it'll be more as Elias with a touch of action in the background, or full-fledged under the mask, murderous vigilante-style Cardiac remains to be seen. Not a bad character in and of himself, but, in a world where we have a lot of anti-heroes and aggressive vigilantes, the gimmick of him being a doctor who preferred to target criminals connected to pharmaceutical greed really kind of limits his stories you can tell. There's only so many times he can say, hey, this guy's got some crazy new medicine, but he doesn't want to share it with anybody unless they have millions. That's nonsense. You can only tell a story like that so many times. So, there you go. Next up, we have one of the few genuine, long-running success stories in villain rehabilitation, and that is the Molten Man. Molten Man, officially known as Mark Raxton, was a chemical engineer who, longing to get rich, did not follow a whole lot of safety precautions and ultimately got caught in an accident and saw his body get covered by an experimental organic liquid metal alloy, which granted him superpowers, including the ability to generate extreme heat and radiation, thus Molten Man. Initially, being young and angry, he did some criminal things, got beat up by Spider-Man a few times, And when it's all said and done, he started thinking, I'm getting a little tired of getting beaten up by this guy. However, the key to all of this was when it was revealed that Mark Raxton had a stepsister who was in fact Peter's close friend Liz Allen. Liz herself would often stand by Mark Raxton, supporting him no matter how many times he got beaten up and sent to prison, which touched his heart and made him realize he really should be a better person, because if he keeps going the way he's going, he's going to drag Liz down with him. And that's no fault of hers. I mean, she's doing what families should do and support her stepbrother. This helped set Mark off on the path to rehabilitation, although there was a quick final fight with Spider-Man due to misunderstood context and situation. Liz herself, in the meantime, had married Harry Osborn, who decided to give Raxton a job as head of security at Osborn Industries. This allowed Molten Man to team up with Spider-Man multiple times over the years, especially when the craziness of the Osborn family, because let's be honest, anybody within a country mile of Norman's going to have a lot of drama and problems in their life, would surface as, hey, you're my beloved stepsister's husband and son, you're part of the family. And Mark always put his family first. So he would be a reliable ally for Spider-Man whenever trouble would come calling. Eventually, over time, Molten Man would appear a little less and a little less. Finally, though, Harry Osborn finds a way to cure Molten Man on his condition, reverting Raxton to his original human state, although he still retained powers of super strength and energy manipulation. In more recent years, Raxton has been seen working for his sister Liz Allen, who has focused more on becoming the big corporate CEO type, as her marriage to Harry has, faltered at times and become a little complicated. Still, Mark finds himself allying with Liz and Harry, but doing it more from the shadows and behind the scenes, choosing not to get directly involved in too many super fights until they come knocking on his door. All in all, not a bad character, but over the decades, as his story of redemption stuck, he's kind of petered out, and it's all a thing. Again, not a bad character, but not somebody that a lot of writers yearn to use, because, again, there's not much to him. It's like, oh, you got super strength. Oh, you can emit radiation. It's like 100 people that do that. I mean, there's a villain that is flat out called the Radioactive Man. So, Mark gets to babysit his nephew Normie, and maybe occasionally, when Osborn craziness gets super high, watch Spider-Man's back for a couple panels. Next up, we have the Rocket Racer. Rocket Racer was a scientific prodigy as a teenager, but recognizing that it would take many years of college and lucky breaks in the scientific industry to ever make the kind of money he needed to support his family and move them to better neighborhoods with lower crime rates. A worthwhile goal. He decided to use his scientific genius for crime, building a souped-up rocket-powered skateboard along with some gauntlets to give him a rocket punch. Calling himself the Rocket Racer, he would attempt a career as a burglar, although pretty much every time he stole anything worth noticing, Spider-Man was there to kick his butt. Fortunately, much like Molten Man before him, after enough times, Rocket Racer would realize, this really isn't doing much better for me than anything else in life I could do, and decided to stop being a criminal and try being a hero. Nothing else. It keeps his beloved mother from worrying about him and his various stints in prison. Because, let's be honest, no mother wants to see their child in prison. Rocket Racer would have a few problems in his initial attempts to reform, but things would start taking a turn for the better when he first encountered Silver Sable, a European mercenary who regularly employed various superheroes in a group known alternately as the Outlaws or the Wild Pack. Taking various freelance jobs from Sable over the years, he made himself some money, felt better about himself, and all in all, started finding himself much more comfortable being law-abiding. After the Marvel Civil War event, when superhero registration became a law, Rocket Racer would register and report to Camp Hammond for training. And after a brief stint of time there, looked like he had fallen back into his criminal ways due to a quick need for money to support his family. However, this was in fact him working undercover for S.H.I.E.L.D. with the deal that they will give him the money he needs in return for helping them prevent the villains from getting this crazy caper pulled off. He didn't 100% succeed in the mission, but given we have not seen him grow angry and desperate and hateful and act criminal again, we can assume S.H.I.E.L.D. still did a lot to help him with his financial needs. Eventually, Rocket Racer would show up in the post-initiative era Avengers Academy. However, given that has itself as a concept not really lasted, we can assume Rocket Racer has moved on and is back to doing various freelance work and trying his best to help out his mother. So is he actually a good character? I mean, he's a sympathetic guy, but dude, your whole gimmick is you hang out on a rocket-powered skateboard. It's not really that impressive. We've literally seen other superheroes do it better. I mean, New Warriors founder Night Thrasher, that was his big gimmick. The super skateboard. Rocket just was kind of always redundant. Not a bad guy, but you can clearly see why a lot of writers weren't that intrigued on hanging out with him. So, next up we have Ollie Osnick, who is an overweight, gifted teenager who, being overweight and super smart, found himself picking Dr. Octopus as his role model. Using his genius, Ollie designs his own variant on Ock's mechanical tentacles, calling himself Kid Ock. However, since he was not really that much a villainous person, he finds himself getting in some misunderstandings. He knocked out a guard. However, Ollie, not being that experienced, being a teenager with making, quick medical assessments, believes he killed him. And Spider-Man, seeing only somebody in the shadows with some obvious tentacles, believing it was the real Doc Ock at work, chases Ollie down and engages him in a quick fight before Spider-Man comprehends everything going on. The guard fortunately regains consciousness, and Spider-Man, realizing Ollie's just a kid that made a few mistakes, returns Ollie home safely with a bit of a lecture. Impressed with Spider-Man's abilities, Ollie then modifies his tentacles into spider legs, borrows a Spider-Man themed Halloween costume, and calls himself the Spider Kid. Unfortunately, his heroic activities often resulted in him being the one needing saving. He retires superheroism for several years, eventually devoting himself to exercising and becoming much more athletic in build. But this newfound confidence in physical prowess brought back his fantasies about being a hero, and Ollie found himself creating and upgrading new and better spider legs. When his girlfriend found herself being paralyzed by muggers, Ollie seeks revenge and creates the identity of Steel Spider, donning a dark blue costume similar to the infamous black suit Spider-Man, and equipping himself with his newest upgraded weapons. Steel Spider locates and brutalizes his girlfriend's attackers. He removes his costume, realizing that this is not who he wants to be. It is one thing to save those in harm. It is a whole nother thing to harm other people. And he focuses on continuing to build a happy, normal life with his girlfriend. Steel Spider would, however, help out when New York would come under siege by larger villain attacks at a time, such as the Onslaught event. And ultimately, during the Superhero Registration Act, Ollie chooses to be unregistered since he is only a part-time hero, causing the government-sponsored Thunderbolt team to come after him. Ollie ends up fighting the Thunderbolts along with two other obscure superheroes, American Eagle and Sepulture. However, due to the sheer numbers game at work, Ollie eventually runs up against the new Venom, formerly known as Spider-Man villain Scorpion, who, being a much more aggressive and psychotic version of Venom, yeah, you thought Eddie Brock was bad, trust me, he had nothing on the Matt Gargan Venom. Venom bites off and eats Ollie's left arm. Ollie's later incarcerated in the Superhero Registration era Prison 42, which was located in the Negative Zone. He has not really been seen since, although as things changed with the Superhuman Registration Act and different people have influenced the way the government chooses to interact with the superhero community, we are sure Ollie has gotten medical aid and no doubt come up with a pretty neat prosthesis to replace his devoured arm. The story of Ollie is ultimately, look, you can't LARP being a superhero. It's not simply enough to have a couple neat gadgets. But if you keep at it and you keep improving yourself physically and mentally, you can certainly be enough of a hero to defend what you want in life, such as a lady love and your own quiet little neighborhood at the very least. Just make sure you stay away from crazy villains hosting alien symbiotes that want to eat parts of you, because that's not going to end well. So, hey, Steel Spider, he was always kind of a wannabe, but he's had a couple brief moments in the sun, and and there's nothing preventing him from showing up again sometime, should a writer remember him and want to treat Ollie like somebody worth having around. We're going to close this out with a character that had a very brief history in the Spider books, although there are more allies I can get into, but, you know, as I often say, I don't want to ramble all day for you because, you know, we all have a lot of things we like to do with our time. And that is the Yuri Watanabe version of the Wraith. There have been a lot of characters in Marvel Universe that have used the name Wraith. This particular one was a captain in the New York Police Department and an ally of Spider-Man, mostly based around the fact that her mentor when she was a young cop was Jean DeWolff, one of Spider-Man's earliest allies in the police department, who unfortunately was tragically murdered in one of the truly iconic Spider-Man stories, appropriately enough titled The Death of Jean DeWolff. So, Yuri finds herself becoming frustrated with how the justice system and the police were unable to deal with powerful and wealthy criminals who always managed to find a way to escape justice for their crimes. Eventually, a vigilante calling themselves the Wraith starts targeting Mr. Negative's criminal syndicate. During one such attack, the Wraith unmasks to reveal Jean DeWolff's face. This is later revealed to be one of the Chameleon's masks stolen from police evidence. After a couple more battles, Wraith is revealed to be Yuri, pretending to be the ghost of Jean DeWolff to scare the criminals of New York, using a costume somewhat inspired by Spider-Man, as well as powers based around Mysterio and his illusions along with Mr. Fear's fear gas. She also has his unique weapon, yellow elastic straps attached to her costume that allow her to wrap up her enemies and swing around the city similar to Spider-Man. Both Wraith and Yuri would continue to work very different sides of the justice system, vigilante and official cop, up until the Goblin Nation arc, in which Wraith found herself getting dragged knee-deep into the heart of the situation due to her close alliance with Spider-Man and fellow police and Spider-Man close ally, Carly Cooper. Much on Carly Cooper on another video. Shortly after the Goblin Nation story, Yuri would get a story focused on her known as Spiral, in which Yuri's faith in the justice system is permanently shattered after Tombstone is released from prison following the gunning down of one of her friends during a shootout with the police. Her former rival and target for the Wraith's Wrath, blah blah blah, here's a little bit of a tongue twister for you, Mr. Negative shows photographic evidence that Tombstone got away with all this because he had bought off the judge for his trial. The Wraith confronts the judge, threatening him, wanting to his immoral actions to be brought to light, including Yuri arresting the judge as the official police chief she is, without contacting the NYPD and following all proper protocol. Mr. Negative continues to feed her tips on other crime lords, straining her relationship with Spider-Man as he believes that Mr. Negative is manipulating her. This is eventually revealed to be true when Mr. Negative starts taking advantage of the Wraith's more aggressive and involved attacks on various crime lords by swiping up and conquering their territories while they are distracted and their own resources strained in these various fights. Everything comes to a head. Yuri goes full-blown vigilante, wanting to put the manipulative Mr. Negative down once and for all, causing Spider-Man to step up and get between the Wraith and Mr. Negative. This causes Yuri to turn against Spider-Man and fight him. Although Spider-Man wins the fight, Yuri gets the final laugh as she leaves her suit behind, taking only the mask with her, declaring that due to the trouble she had gotten in with the rest of the NYPD for her not technically following code of conduct behavior, both as the Wraith and police chief, she decides that Yuri Watanabe is dead and only the Wraith remains. Even though the story is several years old, Wraith has not yet surfaced. Personally, I found her story to be very interesting, especially with everything else going on in these Spider arcs at the time. And I would love to see Yuri return. The idea of a character who potentially blames Spider-Man as much as the other criminals for everything that has happened and not happened in Yuri's career checklist could certainly prove good story material. Can Peter bring himself to treat her like a full-blown villain? Will he try to lure her back to the proper side of heroism? Or more importantly, will she even want to deal with him? Imagine her specifically trying to avoid Spider-Man, only to have him, feeling responsible and guilty as he often does, trying to force the confrontation. Morally, who would be right in that situation? I don't know. Regardless, this has been a quick sampling of the various people that have aided Spider-Man over the years as superpowered individuals. Sometimes they start out fighting him, but with Spider-Man being such a incredible hero and general good person, a lot of them find themselves reforming and wanting to hang with him. In the case of Yuri, kind of went the opposite way, but all things in good time. Yuri can always return, and we'll see how things change between her and Peter then. For now, though, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to let y'all enjoy your weekend, or whatever you got coming up whenever you watch this video. Remember to subscribe, follow the channel. We got some other shows besides the Ramblings, but definitely keep watching the Ramblings because it's going to hit every 7 days. Every Friday we ramble because there's a lot of entertainment to discuss. And we always try to do it with a positive mindset because, hey, it's easy to be negative. It's fun to be supportive. So, support your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and anybody else helping him fight crime. The whip's on us.